Hello and welcome to this edition of Exotic Gardening UK. You watch Chris Weekly, and on today's episode the main thing we're going to concentrate on is digging up the Ensete bananas. Most people, when they grow Ensetes rather than Musas, they grow Ensete maurelii, which is the burgundy red purplish form of Ensete. So it looks like this, but probably less tall and much darker colour. But this one behind me is Ensete Heniba. Much sought after, much rarer, very easy to grow Ensete banana. But like the other Ensete bananas, maurelii and montbéliardii, they all need digging up for winter. Ideally, if you had the space and the heat, you could just dig it up, put it in a large pot, bring it under cover, and keep it well watered and in full growth all winter with the lights and heat. But most people don't have that sort of facility. Most people want to sort of use as least energy as possible and the easiest way possible to overwinter plants. And in case of Ensete bananas, the easiest way is to dry store. Although dry storing, there's a few steps to get the perfect sort of conditions to get that banana through winter. I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm also going to dig up a few, pot them up and keep them growing over winter as well, just to show the difference. So the main steps are: you cut all the leaves off, you dig it up, cut all the roots off, you wash all the soil and compost from around the base of the plant, you turn it upside down for a few days to drain out all the water, and then you stand it the right way up in a frost-free place, ideally above 10 degrees, can be as much as 20 degrees if you really want, and you leave it with no soil or anything over winter. And then next spring you start it into growth with some potting compost and start to slowly water it, and it will grow away next year. So that's the process very quickly. I'm going to go step by step through the process in this video and next week's video as well, because it's a two-stage process. The first stage is digging it up, washing the soil off the roots and cutting off the leaves and draining it. And the second part of it is, once it's drained, it's storing it somewhere for winter. So let's get started. So it looks really cruel because it's still growing quite nicely, but we're going to cut all the leaves off. We can do it one by one, or we can just go in and just basically cut across all the leaves in one, including the top one. It looks very brutal because it basically is. And cut the leaves back. You can use a bread knife, or I'm just using a pruning saw that I've just cleaned before I've done this. At first you can do it quite quickly, just to basically make the plant a lot smaller and easier to dig up. And once we've got rid of all these leaves, we go to the next stage, which is actually digging it up. And they're quite easy to dig up. They've got fleshy roots, nothing woody at all, because it's a herbaceous plant this. And then, yeah, let's just dig it up now and we'll drain it next. So now that we've cut all the leaves off, it's time to actually dig it up. And I've just gone round in a circle down to a spade's depth just to cut through all the roots. And now I'm ready to try to lift it up. And as you'll see, at the base of all these, where the leaves were, there's absolutely loads of water. So that's one of the reasons why you drain it. And it also makes it very heavy when you get to a big size like this one. So I'm just leaving it out. I'm just being careful just to tip it over to get some of the water out. And we don't need all this soil here. We want to try and remove as much soil as possible, because the next stage is to wash the remaining soil off the roots. So I'll slowly go around and do this. I'll lift this somewhere else and we'll get the hose pipe out to wash all the soil off the roots. So now we're in the messy part of my garden. This is where the 6x8 foot greenhouse was until I dismantled it a few months ago. And this area is going to be redone this winter. That's by the by. We're using this space to clean off the roots of the Ensete bananas. So taking away most of the soil. If you've got a really sort of composty soil, it might just fall away, or sandy soil. But mine's obviously got quite a lot of clay in, so a lot of it's stuck to the roots. And you can leave it like this and go to the next stage, but I want to wash off all the roots. So I'm going to go ahead and just basically wash it off. So using the hose, just cleaning all the soil from around the roots, and you can exposing all the nice fleshy white roots. And I'll do this for a few minutes and turn it over just to get rid of all that soil, which takes ages and ages to dry out at this time of year. I'll carry on for another minute or two. And now that's all the soil and compost washed off the roots, and you can see all these live fleshy white roots. They all go around the sides, where the base of the actual corm is sort of pretty woody-ish and hard, and the roots don't come out there. They all come around the side, and as a plant grows, they carry on slowly as a plant widens out, growing at the top in this area. So it doesn't matter if you have a little bit of rot or dead material at the bottom, you can just clean that away. This one actually is pretty hard, so that's great. And now it's a matter of just turning it upside down for a couple of days, somewhere nice and airy and dry. So I'm going to put this along with the rest of the Ensete bananas in my jungle hut upside down, just to drain the water from out the leaves. And also, as these bases sort of shrink a bit, they release tons and tons of water, and will continue doing that for many weeks really. So it's best to get as much water out as early as possible, just to avoid any rot. And then next week I'll show you how I'm going to actually store these over winter. So that's one Ensete banana safely stored in the jungle hut, and it'll stay there for probably 3 or 4 days, just to let all the water drain out. I mean, you could put this straight into the greenhouse or even inside, but if you do, you're going to get a lot of moisture come off this, and if you put it into a greenhouse, it'll just add to the humidity and make everything quite wet, when at this time of year it's hard anyway to keep the condensation down. So it's good to have it outdoors so the air can sort of breeze through and dry these out a bit quicker. If you get a bit of sunlight on it like this, all the better. So it's time to get the rest of the bananas. I think there's about 15 or so others big as this to dig up, place in the jungle hut, and it'll be time to do some other jobs in the garden. Now with the large Ensete Heniba out of the way, it reveals this much smaller Heniba with a slender stem, and I'm going to treat this in a bit of a different way. I'm going to keep this sort of ticking over winter. So I'm going to remove quite a lot of the leaves, but I'm going to keep the centre leaves, and then I'm just going to dig it up, and then I'm going to see what the roots look like, and if they look good, I'm going to pop this up in multi-purpose compost and perlite for extra drainage, and that's going to go into the greenhouse where it's nice and warm, and it will allow this plant to settle in and carry on growing, hopefully very slowly, but carry on growing over winter. So just going to chop off the oldest leaves, and because it's a much smaller plant, it doesn't carry as much water, so I've got less chance of it adding too much water to the greenhouse and adding to condensation, but it will add some because there is quite a lot of water still coming off it. So this one, it's not the healthiest looking one. For some reason it's got a bit of damage on the centre leaves here, but I'm just going to leave these sort of 3 or 4 leaves in the centre, and because it's much smaller, it's easier to dig up and it's easier to transport as well. So just going to get in with the spade, make a sort of circle around it, quite close to the trunk. I don't want a huge root ball on this, so it's pretty easy to do, won't take too long. There we go, one more cut round this side, and there we have a nice Ensete banana that I've dug up. And because it's small, I can easily lift that up, and if I just bring that a bit closer to camera, it's got nice healthy white roots on that. I'll just turn this upside down for a minute or two, just to drain out as much water as possible from the base of the leaves. And then I'll put this into a pot. Okay, so I'm in the greenhouse now, and this Ensete banana that I've just dug up, I've tickled away most of the soil from around. So if I just lift this up, I've got to be careful because it's a very tall plant. Probably didn't look too big outside, but as you can see, it's reaching the roof in here, which is 2.6 meters tall. Anyway, the roots have taken away most of the compost. I've not washed away all the soil because I want to keep the roots intact. I'm going to pot this one up, and as I mentioned, I'm going to use plenty of perlite. I've also gone round and taken away any slugs and dead material from the base as well, and we're going to use the smallest pot possible. So here we have a pot that the banana will just fit in. Got my perlite and got my multi-purpose compost as well, and I'm basically going to put a little bit of compost, a lot of perlite, and we're just going to mix that together. It's very, very free draining. We're going to get banana, put it in, and as I said, it's going to be a bit of a squeeze. And then just backfill with more compost and perlite mixture, which I'll just mix in here. And then I'll just, because it's in a warm environment in here, this greenhouse at the moment, it's not being heated at all. The heater's in here, but it's not being turned on. And right now it's 20 degrees with just a bit of a glancing sun hitting the top of the greenhouse. And it's not dropped below 9 degrees at night in here, so the insulation and double glazing is working really well. So because it's a nice warm environment at the moment, it will cool down obviously as the weather turns into winter, then it should give it enough time for this just to establish, get its roots down, and then slowly tick over for winter. If this started looking unhappy, or I noticed any rot or no root growth after a few weeks, I would put it into a warmer spot or put it onto a heat mat just to kickstart it into life. And this is going to be a little bit cumbersome now. It's standing up fine at the moment, but I'll probably lean it near the walls in case it decides to lean over. So I've got a few other onsets that are on the smaller side, like this one, that I'll bring into the greenhouse as sort of a potted plant. Obviously I've talked about dry storing, which this isn't, although it won't be watered. I should mention this, although I'll give it a little bit of water now, it really won't be watered much over winter. It'll just be kept just ticking over a little bit of water. If you give it too much water when it's cool, then it will rot away. The ones that are properly dry stored, like the one that I'm drying out outside at the moment, that doesn't want any water or any soil over winter. That's just going to be put in here next week and just left to tick over in a completely dormant state. This one is not completely dormant, it's got green leaves and it's got a little bit of moisture. And because it's smaller, it should be fine. So fingers crossed this gets through. I've done this before and it's worked fine in the past. And then in next spring and summer, we'll compare the ones that have grown over winter in pots compared to ones that are completely dry stored. Obviously the big advantage of dry storing is you don't need to put it in a greenhouse. You can put it into an attic, you can put it into a dark integrated garage, you can put it into a cupboard in your house. It doesn't matter, it doesn't need light, it's not growing, it's completely dry, and it means it has no bugs on it. You don't have to worry about aphid infestations. Keeping it with green leaves like this, it's like a magnet for greenfly over winter, especially if you keep it somewhere warm like in your house or conservatory. In here I've tried to check for pests as I bring in each plant. Obviously it will probably at some point over winter get attacked by aphids, so I'll just have to keep an eye on that and wash them down. Thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening UK, where I've been digging up Ensete bananas. Join me next week where I'll be doing a lot more in the garden.